All right. Perfecto. Mm. I'm just going to share this out. Welcome in. Welcome in. We're going to get started in just a few moments. Hello, Catechisses. Hello, Laura. Good to see you. Good to see everyone. Just sharing this out. Please tap the screen and share the live. Let's get it out to some people who may need to hear this evening. We're going to be discussing failure. Hey. And I really think this is a very fascinating subject. And I know a lot of times that we kind of shy away from topics like this because they're uncomfortable, right? But that's the beauty of it all, really, is to like lean into the discomfort. Because if we start leaning into the discomfort, then it actually becomes less painful. So we're going to really break down failure from all different perspectives. Because, of course, as a holistic doctor, I go over all the different aspects of the human experience. If you're new to my channel, welcome. My name is Dr. Erica Steele. I'm a board-certified naturopathic doctor. I hold 7 degrees in my field, and tonight we are going to talk all about failure, right? So let's go ahead and get started. So the first things I'm going to ask everybody to do, right, is just kind of take a moment and settle in. Take a deep breath, get comfortable, grab some water. I'm not going to take up co-host, but thank you. Yes, so we really want to kind of throw out what you know or think or understand about failure, because we always have a lot of these preconceived notions around what failure actually is. And so we're not really going to avoid failure tonight, right? We're going to lean into it. We're going to start to feel all the little uncomfortable aspects of it. Hello, Brianna. All the uncomfortable little aspects of it. But we're going to lean into that discomfort for us to truly alchemize the experience of failure. And we're going to look at failure from so many different angles and so many different perspectives. If you aren't able to make the whole thing, totally fine. The replay will actually be on YouTube for about a week, and then I'll pull it down, hey, in our community. And so if you haven't already, definitely check the link in the bio and like our little community. So go ahead and take a deep breath, relax in, ground out. All right, so here we go. We are gonna get started. All right, so first thing, let's look at kind of where failure began. So failure actually came from more capitalistic and colonial roots because it has to be the success at all costs. So it's like blind success. So we see that right now, in the public health sector for sure. It's like for a little bit of good, we're going to ignore all the bad, but just for that little bit of good. And so it's this, all or nothing response. But of course, when you throw this all or nothing response out there, what happens? You lose something, and a lot of times you lose parts of yourself. And so this is where also too perfectionism has really just reigned true, because it's always about doing things better, doing things perfect, but also too, our culture is very much geared around that hustle mentality. I've got to get up over here. I've got to get up over here. I've got to do this. I've got to do this. Or if you're not in high production all the time, let's say, you have energy or you have, illness or, relationship or whatever the things may be, right? If you don't perform at like 100, and 15%, then all of a sudden you're not valuable, you're not worthy, you're not good enough. And all of these narratives typically are built in, really, from so many different places that we'll break down. So there's an issue though when you equate your productivity with your worth, right? So, let's kind of go back for a minute and visualize, imagine, picture, and pretend, right? With your logic, voice, reason, very keen and specific decision making, that when you were born, everything was perfect, right? And in that perfection, you realize that your worth, right, merely came from you being born. And somewhere along the way, right, we lose that. And even in me framing it in a perfectionism perspective, right, it allows you to see even the impossibility in that. And so we're really going to get to this idea that there was ever once was, right? And we're going to really kind of step into this idea of really failure being just kind of a fabric of our life. And so failure, again, it's not the opposite of success, it's actually the root of it. So this is kind of where we're going to begin to grow our consciousness around failure. So let's kind of first thing look at when you do fail, right? Because when you do fail, there's naturally going to be a grief response to that, because it's not just the thing you were striving for or what you were trying to accomplish, or whatever goal or whatever result that you were trying to gain. So whatever that may be, you're losing that, right? Whatever that may be. And you're also feeling like, right? It's a sensation, it's a feeling that, oh, cool. Oh, I'm so glad. Hey, awesome. What it is now it's a moral dilemma, it's a character flaw. It's now just who you are, right? Who you be. But all of that is so layered with so many different aspects that we're going to get down. But let's talk about the denial first. So there's the denial of, well, this didn't happen, maybe there's still a chance, I'm going to try this, I'm going to try that. And then once you kind of box yourself in and really start to realize, wait a second, this isn't going to happen, whatever this is, then there's the anger. And sometimes it's anger at other people, but a lot of times it's anger within ourselves, right? Because we didn't accomplish whatever goal. And then there's like, well, there was this variable and that variable, and then there comes the bargaining, right? And you're going through all of these processes simultaneously. Maybe you're going through them up and down. There's no real kind of order or majesty, if you will, around how grief shows up, right? It just shows up in all the different components. And then, eventually, as you begin to kind of settle into whatever didn't happen, right? Then the depression kind of sits in. And again, it's the grief and the sadness and the heaviness, right? That inability to feel like you can move forward because now you feel suppressed, right? And then eventually you get bored of that and you go into acceptance where you go, okay, I'm going to pick myself up. I'm going to, move forward, etc. So physiologically, there's a lot of symptoms related to failure. So sometimes people are like, yeah, yeah, yeah. They don't really connect the mind body spiritual connection. So let's talk about the actual symptoms of failure. So your body's going to process lots of different setbacks, right? Little ones, small ones, tiny ones, and then of course the big bangs. And so mentally, you're going to have racing thoughts, self-criticism, difficulty concentrating because of course you're ruminating about all the things. Did I do this? Could I have done this? Did this happen? All the things, right? And then emotionally, there's the shame, there's the disappointment, there's the sadness, there's even anxiety, like what's next, what's going to happen. Hey Jay. And then physically, there's tension, there's fatigue. You just feel you don't want to eat, or maybe you're eating everything. There's kind of a duality that exists with that. And then socially, you can withdraw, you can be more defensive, edgy, and also too, there's a lot of comparison, especially in the world of social media. Everybody's like, oh, this person, that person, right? So then we start to, even self-deprecate further, because, well, why does this person get it? And why does that person get it? And so on and so forth. And so let's begin to actually look at the lens of failure, like actually what it is. So there's early conditioning, or more so where it came from. So there's early conditioning of failure, right? Thank you so much for the roses. So that early conditioning, right, is our caregivers' responses to our failures. So were they supportive? Were they really harsh? Were they demanding? Were we just supposed to expected to know, and then we failed, and then they laughed and they were sadistic? There's so many different combinations to failure, right? And so obviously there's the familiar, right, with your family and that sort of thing, but then there's also educational failure too. So if we're going to school, if you were getting A's on the test, if you were failing the test, if you were struggling reading, any of those things that could quote unquote go wrong, right, in an academic or even educational perspective, that's all framing your perception about failure and your association with it. And then there's hey, lovely. Then there is the emotional patterning, right? So if you were shamed, right? So let's say, as a for instance, you were on the kickball team. I'm just making stuff up, right? You're on the kickball team, and let's say you had a really competitive dad, right, as an example. And you're on the team, they're like screaming and hollering and carrying on, and then maybe you miss the kick or whatever, right? When you go back to your parent, right, are they supportive? Are they encouraging? Or are they dismissive or invalidating? Or do they ignore it? All of that signaling, as a child, is going to really tell you something about yourself, and especially your relationship to failure. So, just for a few minutes, why don't we see failure not as us, right? Because we're starting to create this idea or this archetype of who and what failure is. And so as we're kind of going through this process, really think about who this person is called failure in your life, right? Because you've created this whole persona around failure. And so we're going to get more into that. And because that is actually going to plant those seeds of transformation, so that you can stop holding on to that shroud. Hey, Real Destiny, welcome in. I love your little pink. Where you're holding that shroud of failure on you, almost like a badge of honor. And now you're more disconnected from it. And now it's this person that you can pull in or pull out, right? Because we'll learn that actually failure is just a defense mechanism. So keep that in mind. All right. So speaking of which, as we're going through all of these experiences, and a lot of these are happening 0 to 8 years old. That's when your subconscious mind is developing. That's when your subconscious mind, 9 to 12 is when your conscious mind, which is your pinnacle of your success, where you think you are worthy or capable of achieving, that happens in that developmental place. But let's talk about specifically that 0 to 8 and that subconscious, because that's really when you're making those associations between failure and identity. So who you actually are, right? But here's the problem. Again, this is why I wanted you to separate out. There's the actual, who you are, who you be, right? Hey, Jenny. And then there is the identity of that is failure. Excuse me. There's the personification of the defense mechanism, or the object of failure, right? And so we want to separate out, right? As I try to put it back together, the identity versus the failure, right? Because there's so much of an enmeshment. And again, we think that this is us. And so again, when we have a failure, we go into that protective response. Like, I didn't do it. Oh, I got my hand on the cookie jar. Oh no, that wasn't me. And then we begin to create a self-concept about that. Oh, I'm ashamed because my hand got caught in the cookie jar, right? And now I'm ashamed that I even had the cookies. and then I lied about it, and then I tried to cover it up, and then, all these things. Now you're starting to create all these stories, right? And especially if there, and I didn't go over this, but if there is a religious component to it as well, that's another kind of level of indoctrination. And think about just in terms of your school, your family, any kind of religious, this is all kind of shaping who you be and who you be in the world. And then you do have kind of this potential understanding that, okay, I can do this. This can happen. I can overcome this. There's that rally moment. And then unfortunately though, if you get into these patterns of behavior, right, especially with mindset and talking to yourself, if you're perpetually telling yourself what you can't do, what you won't do, or even still your physical body, you've suppressed all of that, right? Because some people don't want to feel failure, so they suppress, they avoid, they deny, and they compartmentalize. And so what happens is now the nervous system takes on that patterning as well. So it's not even just like, oh, the thoughts. Now this is literally my nervous system responses. This is when I experience a failure, this is what I'm going to do as a response. When failure shows up, this is what it means about me. This is how I'm going to feel. This is how I'm going to, behave, et cetera, et cetera. And some of this, and as we're working this, largely of this is part of the unconscious and the subconscious as well. And so let's look at the age development when we're looking at failure. And this was so fascinating in family practice, let me tell you. Oh my gosh, because I treated, hey, too lovely, and hey, you already know we're like here, but I cannot pronounce your name, and I will work on it every day, right? I will get through the failure. And so one of the things that I learned in family practice, yes, is that we know the ages, right? Yes, I know. We know ages of development. You may not be conscious of these ages, but this is kind of your age of development. So, from 0 to 5, the world is a beautiful place. The world is a happy place. Thank you. The world is just this, utopia. And then all of a sudden, bam, something happens. Usually it's a pretty significant event. And then you realize, oh, wait a second, something is wrong here. This is not the, beautiful, magical place that I thought, right? And really what's happening is the ego starting to really get aware of like, wait a second, wait a second. There's an outside world and there's an inside world, right? And so that's when that eight, nine, they really start to get autonomous and like, they start to talk back and that sort of thing, because that's it. I know who I am, right? And this is where hyperparentification naturally is developed. So let's say, those early age developments, 5, 6, 7, 8 or whatever, or even younger than that. Thank you for the roses. Even younger than that, there was some sort of trauma, right? And trauma is so broad, right? A trauma can be divorce, it can be SA, it can be physical, it could be emotional neglect, it could be, as small as somebody, stole a toy on, the playground. Like it doesn't have to be a lifetime television movie, but there's something that has allowed you to establish that there's a me and there's a you and there's two different people. So now I'm gonna start to test those boundaries of me versus you. And depending on my reality makers, meaning my parents, depending on how stable or unstable they were, right? That's when I'm going to go, wait a second, these people are nutty. This is not going to work. Right. And so that's also where you start to pull away. And I think it's also really a part of kind of that next generation, right? That next generation angst. We always thought we knew better than our parents, and our children always think that they know better than us. I think it's also part of our evolutionary process too. So I don't mind it, but then I'm a little rebel too. So anywho, then we get into that 10 to 14 years old range, and in that range, it's I don't belong, right? So that's when like your friend group is really important, but there's a lot of hidden shame in that because there's all these social constructs, that intensify. I've got to look like this, I've got to be like this, I've got to fit into here, right? Or I don't fit in, and then there's the shame that's attached to that. So there's a lot of different connections that happen during that time. But again, you're kind of moving away from your parents. And then, that 18 to 21, that's really when I've seen a lot of the failure to thrive show up. So, kind of think in a traditional sense, that 18 to 21 is when you're kind of leaving the house, traditionally, obviously, there's so many different combinations, but let's say traditionally you're leaving that house at that 18 to 21-year-old range. However, that launch happened or did not happen, okay, that creates a lot. Okay, so if you launched and it was like away we go, and I've got this and I've got that and this is working and that's great, right? That's a whole different ball game than, I had to leave because of this, or this trauma happened, or that happened, or this breakdown happened, or, and so that launch really informs the rest of your kind of adulthood, if you will, and really your relationship to failure, right? And so those are some of the big doozies in terms of ages. So again, as we're going through this, really kind of put yourself in it. Think about, your 5-year-old self. Think about, your 8-year-old self. I love that girl, man. She's spunky. Look at that 10 to 14-year-old, self. Maybe a little awkward there. And then, that 18 to 21, right? How was that? Were you like girls gone wild? Or were you more subdued and, were things kind of a little bit more difficult or more internal? So just kind of think about those things. And then naturally, as you begin to think about those things, you think, well, wait a second. How did I survive this? And so a lot of this relationship to failure that we have is indeed based around protection instinctual instincts, right? Because in each one of those variations, we're trying to save ourselves, right? Something's happened. We think it's much greater than ourselves. And then we're trying to save ourselves in the process. So it really comes from a very primitive place. Remember, we were talking about this is a very nervous system related. So it's not just a cognitive psychological, right? I can rationalize my ass off. That's not what this is. This is a mind, emotional, physical sensation that is happening. And they may all be happening at different times. I always often say that people, their minds are over here, their emotions are over here, their bodies are over here. And so that's where a lot of the confusion is we're all over the place. And so that neurobiology or that neurology has to be safe, right? Otherwise, we're tensing, racing thoughts, we can't sleep. Oh my gosh, we talked about those physical symptoms kind of already. So you should really be connected with them. Hey, Fit Mom. And so again, is we're understanding, we go, okay, all right, I can do this, I can accomplish this, I can try this, I can get this done, right? And then that evolutionary wisdom comes in where we go, okay, I had this experience and I had that experience and I had this experience, and then we begin to adapt to whatever it is. And so you notice that, like, in that hustle mentality, right? Or in that hustle culture, the more that you fail, sometimes the more that thrives, that more that gets you going, the more that you're like, oh God, now you're getting excited to go against the resistance. So that's when you really optimize with it. However, I'm going to teach you guys a little bit of a more neutral way, because we don't want to even when we come from that kind of raw grit place, that's still using a lot of energy, right? And sustainability is like the name of the game, because you've got to be able to sustain your energy, right, over a whole period of time. So I don't want to tie my energy up into any excessive emotion that's not going to serve me, right? And this is when we're talking about optimization and getting your mind, your emotions, and your body all in the same configuration. So, hey, Emmanuel. All right. So, let's kind of begin that process. So, in your mind, while I find the right slide, right, kind of visualize an event or some sort of moment or something, some association that you have to failure. So, go ahead and kind of bring that up in your mind, take a deep breath, close your eyes, whatever you need to do, just to kind of really capture that. So, right. So you're going to settle into where you feel it in your body, what you're thinking about, what your thoughts are about it, how you feel about it. Is it resolved? Is it not resolved? Is it partially resolved? Is it not dealt with? Do you not want to deal with it? There's all these different sensations that can be happening, right? So now what we're going to do is we're going to use all this as feedback. Instead of our normal avoid, repress, deny, all the things, or go into just a whole emotional puddle, right? We're going to pull it in and we're gonna go, okay. So and look, the tears are valid, the sobbing is valid, all of that is valid. Once we get to a place where we can get that amygdala to tone down, and we're able to kind of begin to face this. This is why we went into the grief aspect of it, because you may be back in the grief, and that's okay, right? Be where you are. Right? There's a difference between power versus force. Okay. So I'm going to kind of teach you this concept a little bit if I haven't already. So, and this is kind of the difference between holistic medicine and allopathic medicine, right? So force, right, is when obviously I'm forcing something, I'm pushing something, I'm making something happen. If this doesn't stop growing, I'm going to cut it out, right? I'm going to radiate it. I'm going to burn it. I'm going to medicate it. It's a very heavy hand, right? So that's a little bit different than being in your power, right? Because in fact, when you're heavy hand like that, you're actually out of your power. You're not actually living in alignment with your highest self, with yourself, with your mental, emotional, spiritual, psychosocial, hey DJ, state. You're actually living incongruent to it. Okay. So when you're in your power, right, there is no wanting to effort past where you are in the moment. You're actually firmly grounded in the moment. So you can pick up on all these sensations that are happening, right? Meaning that you recognize the conscious awareness, right? You recognize the thoughts, you recognize the feelings, you recognize your nervous system adaptations. So, hey, Colleen, so these things take time, right? They take practice. I would say the shortest distance to get there is meditation, right? So 10, 15 minutes a day. Remember, it's a practice. You're not getting anywhere, doing anything. You're just being with yourself. You're stopping the running. Okay. You're just sitting and you're being. And so if your mind still is running, it just needs to catch up. That's it, right? So that's what happens when you're meditating and the mind is just going, going, going. The mind needs to catch up. Remember, I said the mind is over here, the emotions are over here, the physical body is over here. So you're stopping, right? Physical body's going to come up because it's going to be like, whoa, we just stopped, right? And then the emotions start to percolate and then the mind is trying to fix it. So all the time. So what we're going to do is we're going to interrupt that, all that communication, right? And we're going to sit with it. And I think the sitting with it part is probably the hardest, honestly, right? Because we're not conditioned to do that. We're conditioned to avoid, repress, deny, and work. Work more, do more, be more, right? Maybe if I have one more conversation, maybe if I try this one last thing, what if I, again, we're operating out of force, right? Instead, if we stop and we sit and we listen, right? Whatever comes, because remember, meditation is when God speaks to you. Prayer is when you're speaking to God. Meditation is when God is speaking to you. So know the difference, right? So if you're looking for answers, you got to stop so that you can hear. Because again, God, spirit, creator, whatever you want to call it, whatever connects us all little humans together, right? There's something, right? There's something. And here's how I know there's something. Because I can feel if a person comes in my house pissed off. They don't even have to say anything. I can feel it. And I'm sure you too. You can feel it too. If the vibe's not right, the vibe's not right, right? What does that mean? We're all connected somehow, some way, right? We don't know how, right? And the how is not important, right? But let's just pretend for a moment that we're connecting in with our highest self, not our humanity, not our hustle culture, our capitalism brain, our post-colonial mindsets, right? Not any of that indoctrination. We're just actually sitting with ourself and being, just for a moment, maybe two, maybe three, maybe five, maybe 10, maybe even 15, right? And if you go past 15, look, I can't help you at that point simply because you're going deep at that point. But hour-long meditations, man, are like luscious, right? But very difficult to find the time for for me to sit for a whole hour these days. I'm sure I could, but I probably fall asleep. So now we look at, we're sitting, we're being, we're doing. Now we're getting some answers, right? And so those answers are, do I need to redirect? Right? Do I need to refine? Maybe I need to learn something new. Maybe I need to dig deeper, a new skill. Or maybe I just need to pause, right? I love that song. What is it? Oh gosh, I'm not even gonna throw it out there. There's a song that I have that like whenever I need to rest and I'm not resting, I'll throw it on and it's like boom, yep, exactly. Let It All Work Out by Lil Wayne. So that song just like, because he talks about, I mean, there's other stuff in it too, but he really talks about just sitting with it. It's all going to work out, right? And half the time I don't need to be getting involved in it. I don't need to be sitting here meddling with it. If I just sit and I be and I'm present, I know my place. I know where I'm supposed to be, right? I know exactly what to do, when to do it, because I have trust and faith and I'm in my higher self, right? So, how do we get there, right? So all that sounds amazing, right? However, we need to tone our nervous system in order to do that, because our nervous system is literally on 100, okay? We are getting mass stimulation all of the time, if it's not weather, if it's not politics, if it's not our emotional state, if it's not our work, if it's not a child, if it's not a spouse, if it's not, fill in the blank. I'm just kind of throwing things out there, right? But you have a lot of stimulus in your life, right? Even if that stimulus is just you, yourself, and I, okay? That's enough stimulus just to last a lifetime. Goodness gracious. And so when we are approaching things like failure, which calls for us to expand and express and move forward and all the things, right? We recognize that our primitive mind, right? That mind that absolutely has no contemplation, which goes into freeze, fight, fawn, right? Fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Those are our connectivity in our primitive brain. I have a class where I teach you all about your primitive brain. I don't know, I have to look at the schedule. I'm working on it and getting it all worked out, but I do a whole class on this about your primitive brain and how to work with your primitive brain, because that is so hardwired, and your nervous system is also hardwired in there too. So anytime you come into any of the uncomfortability that happens with failure, right, the pressure, because you're having to look and grow and expand and all those things, right, that nervous system from those memories of I don't belong, or something's wrong, or don't you know who I am, or any of those things, right, that will activate that primitive mind. And so then we talked about these symptoms of, panic or shutdown, or now I'm moving. Oh my gosh. I could literally tell um patients that would come. I can literally tell by your voice on the phone, the cadence of the voice, right? Because when you're in that survival mode, you barely take a breath. Like you're just like, oh, okay, all right. So I got this and 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 this and this and boom, 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 and it's you're going a mile a minute. That is your nervous system on overdrive. That's your adrenal glands. That's epinephrine. That's norepinephrine. That's chemicals. That's suppressing digestive system, right? That yes, exactly. You're like running, so your body is running, right? Your emotions are somewhere, right? They're bouncing all over the place. They're trying to keep up. Maybe your body and your emotions are in a fight, and then your mind is like hanging on for dear life. So there's so many different combinations of it. You're trying to figure this out. What is happening to me? And then there's the more subtle kind of laid back approach where this is more my husband's style. He'll just kind of like he'll be right in front of you and disappear. Like he's got this amazing like disappear, shut down, go into the void, like go into the darkness, right? You like never see him, right? He'll be right in front of you. Whereas I'm definitely that hyper functioning, let's get it done, let's get it moving, let's, do a whole bunch of, impossible stuff really quick. And then there's naturally, if you're really stuck in that, really this is more from abuse and having to tiptoe around primary caregivers is that people pleasing, right? So if your primary caregivers were explosive, if they didn't fulfill your needs, or if they were narcissistic, if it was about them, all of those things, then you're going to go into that self-abandonment mode, and you're going to want to please, you're going to want to fix it, you're going to want to make it better, you're going to want to, and it almost becomes like an addictive kind of quality. But it's really coming from grief and again, self-protection as well. So that's why we really want to look at these things, not from our humanity of all of the noise that we make, the meaning we make around it, but really from more of our higher perspective and our understanding, because we are not failure, right? Failure has drifted into our lives from time to time. Hey, Robin. Hey, Mary. And so we want to look at, how our childhood experiences, how our nervous system responses, how our perceptions. Yeah, I know. I am a little bit blurry. I got a new phone, and it has like a screen protector over it. And I think maybe it's a screen protector and I don't have like the little, I know everybody's like the back camera, but then I can't see everything. So, first world problems over here. All right, here we go. Let's see. All right, so here we go. Now we're going to get into failure as a feedback. So now we've kind of brought you up to speed. Now we know all the who's, and what's, and why's it around failure. Now let's start to kind of pick up where this data is coming from, right? Because again, this is not a personal indictment on you, okay? This is just an experience that we have in life. We're going to probably have millions of failures in our life. So if we're just starting out in life, or even if we're a pro like me and we failed a lot, then we want to really build a healthier relationship with failure so it doesn't take us out, because clearly we need some motivation. So remember, failure is just showing us what's not working. That's it. Obvious, clearly, because if it was working, you wouldn't be failing, right? And then we recognize that failure is something to do with the subconscious mind. Hey, Kimberly, it's something to do, is some sort of unresolved trauma or some sort of sabotage. So it's either subconscious, right? Which is unresolved trauma. So that's 0 to 8 years old. So it's one of those components we talked about, or it's the launch part, right? It's the development or it's the launch. So that 9 to 12-ish, that kind of area, or even beyond, but really solidified in that 9 to 12, that's where that self-sabotage becomes. That's where a lot of that mirroring and that comparing yourself to this person, that person, and the world, and all of those. And this is all, again, how you're developing your conscious mind, but also how you're developing your pentacle of success. Remember, I told you that. So whatever also your social circle was is also very informative in terms of your relationship with success and how far you can go and whatnot, right? And so this is just a construct, remember. And so you also are looking at alignment, right?
So now there's fixed ways of being, and that comes in much later in life. You start to develop these fixed ways of being, because remember, failure is just a survival mechanism. It's a defense mechanism. That's all it is. And so you get into this fixed way of thinking of this is wrong, or this is right, or this is good, or this is bad, right? So we're going to use that framework for right now, but recognize that this framework doesn't really exist, unfortunately. And so, but it's a safe kind of, cocoon to be in. And so as we kind of let that go, right, we're no longer, we're no longer holding on for dear life, right? But it's really uncomfortable in the beginning to let that rigidity go, especially because we've been trained and conditioned so much. So let's look at alignment, right? This very kind of etherical kind of, non-physical sort of concept, right? Let's say it's having what you want versus not having what you want. That's very, very simple, right? So if you have what you want, you're in alignment. If you don't have what you want, you're not in alignment, right? And so it takes all the metaphysical kind of connotation out of it. But just know there's a lot of dynamics to it. Okay, so when we're looking at, how we come into alignment in holistic medicine, we're looking at physical, right? Your physical body is naturally going to fuel, right, how your mental and emotional, and sometimes the other way around, right? So you have your physical, you have your mental, you have your emotional, but you also have your environmental, right? So your home, your work, your relationships, those kinds of things, your money situation, right? Your neighborhood, right? All of those things, right, are going to affect those aspects of it, because that's your kind of cocoon outside, right? You have your personal cocoon, and then you have your outside cocoon as well. So we look at those aspects of it. So I'm going to ask in a journal prompt. Hold on one second. Let me pull this up. All right. I want to ask you, I think I can read how that. And I think I'm going to ask you a different way as well. Okay, so again, going back to that time when you failed, right? And being with that failure, what do you think was missing? And it's literally the first thing that comes to mind when I say, what do you think was missing? Right? And so hold on to that thought as we kind of keep going around, because remember, this is just feedback. And so as we're getting feedback, we're just going to be curious, right? We're going to be curious about what that is. And so as we build that curiosity, we're also going to understand that there's layers to this as well. And so we look at self-compassion, because the first thing is going to be shame and guilt, right? I'm wrong, I'm bad, I need to be punished. And so self-compassion is always going to be the first step, right? So when we start to face it, we go, okay, all right, I've done the very best with all the tools that I have at the time. Okay. Nobody gets married to say, I really am excited about my divorce, right? Nobody has a child to go, I can't wait till this child just totally disowns me. Nobody goes into these things. I'm going to start a business to fail and lose everything. Nobody goes into these ventures with this concept, at least consciously, hopefully, that they're going to fail. What happens is failure happens and failure occurs. And then our relationship with failure starts to get all fun. And so we want to look at and observe our emotional patterns, but also to our physical patterns as well. So where we're feeling it in our body can also help us to understand where we're feeling it emotionally. So for instance, if we feel it on our chest, that's grief. If it's our stomach, it's fear. If it's our shoulders, kind of responsibility. Other people like think Atlas Shrugged, carrying the weight of the world. If it's our brain, it's kind of overthinking, or our heads. So there's all kinds of different areas. If it's low back, lack of support, so those kinds of things also give us clues, in terms of what's happening. And then also too, we have to recognize our inner child. So our inner child has an experience and a relationship to this idea of failure. And so it's also going to make itself mean these things. And so we look at things like, guilt, letting others down. I can't believe, oh, thank you, DJ. I can't believe I failed a lot in my life, so much to the point of creating a whole webinar around it. So, I let other people down, or, I'm not being good enough. I'm not hitting that, that excellence, that we're supposed to always hit. Or even that it's just that deeper anxiety and that worry and that fear that happens every time that you have to pick it back up and try and try. And then just that exhaustion and that despair of having to keep trying and trying and trying and not getting to where you need to go. So again, as you're kind of experiencing these emotions, right? What do you make that mean about yourself? Because you're making this mean all kinds of things about your identity, who you are, who you think you are, all of these components. So continue to kind of sit with that as we go through this process, because truly this is that self-judge that's showing up. I can't remember which class we were in, but I was teaching you about the archetypes and the judge being an archetype. And so I think it was the last part of Intro to Holistic Medicine, or it might have been a discipline class. It might have been discipline. And so we begin to recognize, those old wounds, those old patterns, and we begin to start to listen to what our inner child, or what our child, right, that had that relationship with failure, what they needed to hear, what they needed to say. So instead of, you're wrong, you're bad, you need to be punished, or whatever messages you were, and those messages could have been overt or covert. They didn't have to be direct, right? You've got to go back and kind of scoop that baby up, and you've got to begin to reparent your inner child, right? Otherwise, you're going to have duality, which means that you're going to have your adult self that thinks it's operating, as an adult, however old you are, and then you're going to have an underdeveloped child self who's running the show. Okay. And so we have a lot of examples about, children in adult bodies running the show in our current administration. And so again, it's about raising up our little child, right, inside, the one that didn't get hugged, didn't get loved, didn't get cared for, didn't get supported, didn't get whatever it felt like it needed, right? And we begin to nurture that part of ourself, and most importantly, that relationship that we have to failure and not being good enough and not achieving and blah blah, all that, the whole story. I don't even have to fill it in. You already know. Thank you for the roses, Catherine. I appreciate you. And so as you begin to look at this stuff, you then begin to integrate it in to yourself and who you are. Let me grab my charger. All right. So now, if that wasn't fun enough, so your childhood obviously is on you. That's your stuff. I mean, it's all on you, unfortunately. Nobody's going to come and save us. Disney was a lie. I blame Disney for pretty much most anything and everything, because they really set us up. I'm still waiting for the squirrels and the birds to come and fold my laundry, and for them to do like my housework. And I feel like I failed. All right, cool. So now that we got that in there, so if our inner child, those shenanigans weren't bad enough, now we're going to look at our intergenerational trauma. Yay! And so those are our inherited patterns. So those are our, reality makers, our caregivers, their relationship to failure. And then it's looking at how they interpreted failure and their relationship with failure, and deciding, does that work for you, or does that not work for you? And then it's about recognizing those family patterns when those triggers around failure kind of show up. So in my family dynamic, both my parents are Marines, right? And so it was a lot of, break you down to build you back up kind of thing. That's like our Marine Corps motto or whatever. And so there's never like, if the bar is here, it's always raised to here. If the bar is here, it's like the bar, it's never ending. You're never going to get to it, right? You just give it up. Right. So what does that do to another person's relationship to failure? Initially, you try to achieve it, and you try to achieve it, you try to achieve it, until one day you wake up and go, I'm never going to get there. It's never going to happen. And why is that, right? It's because they can't see. If they can't see you, then it's a wrap. Like there's no, we can't force people, and that's any relationship. It doesn't have to be parental figures. It can be a partner, it could be a friend, it could be, a roommate, it could be somebody. I will light people up who are trying to sell me stuff on social media. like I'm like, when they like, a guy called me a coach earlier today, and I was like, a coach? Really? A coach? Like, so, these sorts of things, right? They happen, right? They're mirrors. They show us back to ourselves, right? And so as we begin to look at that and we recognize these patterns, we also can see the relationship that we have in the dynamics, right, of human beings. We unfortunately, we need each other to be able to see ourselves, right? We cannot see ourselves by ourselves. I know we want to see ourselves by ourselves, and believe you me, that would be great, but we can't heal what was wounded in relationship by ourselves, unfortunately. That's the normal self-protective response, is to go into self. And believe you me, take as much time as you need. I do not believe in forced integration at all. And so whenever you're ready, and even if some of those cycles are ending the relationship, and choosing yourself, like that's a whole nother option as well. Because when we begin to consciously heal, it's not about anyone's feelings, right? It's about your feelings, but it's also about your honor and your dignity and your integrity and your lineage and your legacy. And there's so much more depth to it than just these individual relationships. Because remember, when we're talking intergenerational, we're healing. Unfortunately, we're deciding what part of our lineage that we're healing, especially if you are an Afro-Indigenous person, a Black person, a Native person, any Indigenous people, etc. Because we were never allowed to actually heal, and we're still partially not allowed to heal. If we say, ouch, that hurts, we're told we have a victim complex. So it really perpetuates that cycle, right? And so that's why acknowledgement is so key and so critical to the practice of actually healing. And acknowledgement can't always be one way and one-sided. So when we're consciously healing, we're looking at all the different dimensions and all the different aspects of it. There's lots of tools and techniques that can help with this that don't make it so in the psychological realm. When we're dealing with intergenerational trauma, I find that it's best not to deal with it on the psychological level. It's much easier to deal with it on a psychosocial, spiritual level. After you've processed through a lot of the emotional wounding that's attached to it, because then you have more access, not only to yourself spiritually, but you also have more access to your ancestors. So I teach more about that I teach a class on intergenerational trauma and shadow integration and healing in that level. And if you guys are new, again, tons of classes. I'm super excited to be able to teach you guys so much stuff. All right. Now we look at our environment, right? So our environment can be our current environment. It can be our previous environment. There's an interrelationship. So when we look at our environment, we look at our family dynamics, right? We look at the emotional disappointments that we had in childhood. Did I not get the doll that I asked for? These are all failures, right? Think about it when you're 4 or 5 or 8 or whatever, and you don't get, the doll that you want or whatever. There is a big emotional, now you look back and like, oh, I don't care. But back then it was like a big thing. It was like a deal. And everything was like that because you were still in the id. And then you look at your professional world and your work, right? And the professional setbacks that maybe you're doing or other people's doing, right? And those can trigger so many identity crises, because it's connected to our worth, it's connected to our finances, which finances also get into our survival, our security, our stability, also can trigger our scarcity. Also to there's another one that I pulled out. It was Oh, exploitation. There's exploitation wounds as well that are like, whoa, gnarly. So again, like there's a lot of different tentacles that exist. And then naturally, we left out the most favorite part is relationships. So that's interpersonal relationships, attachment failures, you know, wounds, fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, all of those aspects emotionally that relationships just create, right? We've got imperfect people. So, and even the most loving of relationships, even the best of relationships are going to be painful. What is it? Bob Marley said, what is it? Everyone's going to hurt you. You just have to, realize the ones worth suffering for, that kind of thing. And so, we understand that again, we can't heal what was wounded in relationships by ourselves. Sorry, guys, I'm not the messenger, or I'm the messenger. I didn't write the script. Okay, so now we're going to look at your relationship with your health and your body. So this is a really big topic that we look at, especially when people are dealing with chronic disease. Okay, hey Dee. So a lot of times in my experience in working with patients, especially with chronic diseases, them feeling like their bodies failed them, or in reverse, them feeling like they failed their bodies, right? Or I did everything that I could. I was doing this. I was eating all the things. I was drinking the water. I was moving my body, and all of these things were happening, but I still dot dot dot, right? This still dot dot dot, right? Fill in the blank. And so we can oftentimes have a lot of grief associated to, did I do everything right? The denial cycles, the bargaining, what could I have done better? What could I have done differently? And that also happens too in a caregiver situation as well. So don't think that, even if you haven't experienced, if you've been a close caregiver to someone, definitely, because you're in it with them, good, bad, or indifferent. If you like it, don't like it, you're in that baby with them. And so you're going into the ups and the downs and the emotional discomfort. And then also too, the mental aspects of it, right? If you're forgetting things, if, you walk into a room and, why did I come in here? Or if you have any kind of family history of, let's say, dementia, those kinds of things, a lot of times there's a lot of fear around that. Also, too, if there's cycles of depression, right? Or there's mania, or there's high reactivity, right? Even with that physical body. Or then naturally, if there's any physical limitations, especially if you had a physical you were really fit and then boom, right? So I was a wild child and I broke my neck when I was 24 years old. And so I went from, I think I was around 24, yeah. So I went from, doing this, going to school, having this happen, making this happen, doing this, doing that, right? To boom, broke my neck. And now, I'm in a halo. Oh no, I can't do anything. So there's a lot of course, physical limitations, because in a halo you got to like pull everything up from the bottom. You got to take like little kind of bird bath sort of businesses. It's an absolute mess, right? And so having those physical limitations, like even just being able to lay down, I had to like put all these like pillows and stuff in between, because it's literally like an erector set drilled into your skull. It's crazy. And so I don't know why they haven't advanced that thing. And so there was, again, I go from, being super active, playing the guitar, living my life, right? Getting my life off the ground to boom, stop. So there's a lot of grief and there's a lot of depression around that. Ramadas actually talks a lot about that too. So as we begin to really face all of these aspects of our relationship with our health and our body and failure, again, we begin to settle in, we begin to accept our mortality, we begin to maybe not fear so much, right? Because again, we can't heal in a space of fear. So even if you have a physical limitation or you have a chronic disease, if you are in this constant state of fear, not only epinephrine, norepinephrine, all those neurochemicals are going to be going, you're going to be inhibiting your immune system, inhibiting your digestive system, all those things. But more importantly, your mental, emotional state is not going to put you in alignment for healing. And so as you begin to accept, right, what your current state is, whatever that is, that brings you closer in. So what is her name? She wrote a book called Dying to Be Me. And Anina Morjani, I think is her name. And so she was literally like, it's a wrap. Doctors were like, we're just waiting to call it. She's in a coma, all this stuff, all the things, right? And so as she's in this experience and she's kind of going in, right, she's making these decisions. Does she stay, does she go, etc. And as she decides, to stay, then her body goes through a miraculous healing, right? And so we know that there is capability of miraculous healing. It's just a matter of acceptance. And that's what I find a lot of in my practice I have over the years is helping people get to a level of acceptance with what they've manifested, body, mind, and spirit. And the less I think you fight that process, the faster that your healing will come. Hey, Stacy. Hey, Coffee. Welcome in. Hey, Chrissy. Welcome in. Now let's look at the relationship of emotions, right? I know we've talked about that, but emotional failure and goal disappointment, because remember, it's not just the situation, circumstance, event, etc., but it's also the emotions that are tied to that. Hello, presente. So there's the unmet expectations, right? So I thought I was going to do this. I thought this was going to happen. I thought, that would happen, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And now recognizing and realizing, nope, that's just not going to go down. And so there's, again, a lot of grief attached to it, a lot of longing, a lot of sadness. Hold on one second. I can't chew gum and put this in at the same time. Okay, there we go. All right, that works. All right. So there's the unmet expectations, right? So those are those feelings of personal rejection, feeling of personal failure, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then, of course, there's the emotional spiral, as one accepts, oh my God, the drama. And so all that disappointment, it triggers all the emotions, all the things. And that, of course, is going to cloud our judgment, cloud our decision making, make us highly reactive, and not able to fully make quality decisions. And also, it's external pressure and external stress. I teach a class on logic, voice, reason, and decision making. And believe you me, that is a very expansive class because we start to break down actually where your decisions are coming from. And you would be really surprised about where your decisions actually are coming from. And so as we begin to integrate all of these things, that unmet expectation, that feeling, those sensations of failure, your thoughts about failure, your physical manifestations of failure, you've gone through all of that kind of that emotional spiral. Yeah, exactly. It's the crash out. That's the crash out. It's the failure. And you know what? I'm so glad you said that, because that is literally like TikTok. Okay. So you notice that somebody will be on a panel, right? The host or whoever will be grilling the person on the panel, right? And the person who's being grilled on the panel can't keep up, right? What do, right? They're trying to hit the mark, but they're failing. And then what happens? Woo, crash out, right? It's the failure, right? Instead of being able to, kind of quickly bounce back and quickly, but also to not associate themselves with the failure. See, because remember, like most of the time the people coming up are also so indignant too. Like, isn't that funny? Like they're so like they like loud and wrong, like just loud and wrong, like way wrong. And so as they're loud and wrong, they're trying to defend their point. But again, they're defending their point not from the present reality, clearly, because that's just logic, right? We're just, because if I give you new information as a logical person, you're gonna take in that information and go, yeah. But if I'm coming up, my 4-year-old, 5-year-old, 8-year-old, 10-year-old, 12-year-old, fill in the blank self with all my conditioning on top of it, right? And you're telling me that all my identity that I've built my entire life is wrong, Absolutely not. It's like an ego death, that we're watching, which is kind of fascinating. So my mom would say, the truth will first piss you off and then it will set you free. And so there is an emotional state that happens to all this. And whether you reach for anger as your tool or you reach for, I'm like a puddle, like I'll go into tears like in an instant, mostly because I had to be strong for so long. And so yeah, I'm like all about the vulnerability now. Okay, so as you kind of begin to really be with your failures more emotionally, you recognize that they just guide you. They're just tools. I always say that. And we do actually have a class called Emotions as Tools. And so using your emotions and your emotional upsets as actual tools. And so that's where we begin to integrate these things, and we begin to make different decisions, and we begin to dissect, and we begin to really become more aware of what's going on, truly. And so while we talked a lot about different case studies and storytelling, I've kind of infused those in. And so we'll get to, right on time, my favorite, absolute favorite, hold on, which is vulnerability, like we talked about. So vulnerability requires a lot of courage. And here's why: because you have to be able to let go of who you think you are. And you have to be able to step into who you actually are, which means that you've got to be willing to let go of all of the walls and all of the masks and all of the self protections and all of the defense mechanisms. Now, that takes time. This is like, imagine you're just like an onion layer, right? So you're going to peel back a layer and peel back a layer and peel back a layer. Hey, books, peel back a layer and peel back a layer, right? Because that's all your protective armor that you've created around yourself in order, again, to survive life. But as you begin to, develop healthier relationships, I'm doing well, thank you. Develop healthy relationships, develop connections with yourself, connections with your emotions, connections with your thoughts, your primitive mind, all of these things. Now you are more comfortable in who you be, right? And so it doesn't really matter anymore who's this and who's that and who's this and who's that. Like I'll tell you, here in St. Lucia, everything is just so like, it's like back in the 70s, right? And so a lot of times when you're doing things, it can be really challenging. And so I remember I was at the bank one time, and I mean, you have to wait in this like hour-long line, and you get up there, you're like fighting for your life, and then you pray that somebody knows what you're talking about, and then you're like going back and forth or whatever. I had been through the ringer, right, this day. Like I had been through it all. And I remember finally got up to the teller, and he was walking me through the process of something I can't remember, and I was literally like in tears, like I'm just like bawling, and he's laughing at me, and I was just like, can you please not laugh at me right now? Like, I mean, I was like, I have no shame at this point. I've had many Yoko Ono moments of just like pure emotional upset in places. And so, I think a part of that is being able to see the humanity in self, but also just not being willing to compartmentalize, right? And there's a time and a place and all the things, right? But I think that as you get more comfortable with yourself and more comfortable with who you be, you begin to embrace vulnerability. And as you begin to, because you get more in touch with your own mental and emotional state, and you open up far more empathy for other people, while at the same time, you're balancing your ability to feel safe and your willingness to open up and let go. And really, healing becomes more important, right? I always talk about certainty without logic, but there's also growth and uncertainty. It's actually healthy to feel not balanced, right? I'm not talking about like bipolar swings, hey comrade, but I'm talking about, being uncomfortable and being okay being uncomfortable and not needing to fix the discomfort, and just learning how to, sit with it. All right, so enough of that sitting with that stuff. Nobody wants to sit with it, just joking. So most people love this idea of reframing. So we will talk about kind of reframing. Now, I kind of walked you through again your emotional state, which I really think is really where like the juice is, because the more that you clear out that emotional state, the more access it's going to give you to your spiritual state, because you become more sensitive, you become more in tune, you become more trusting. It's a vibe, right? But let's say if you just need like a little quick giddy up, right? This is where reframing, which is going to be more in the logical, more in the psychological, where this is like a pen and paper kind of exercise where you kind of look at the lesson here. What did I learn? What did I get from it? And you just kind of start writing out what it is, right? Or what you've made it be. And then as you start to do that, you can read it out loud, read it to a friend, and begin to shift the language in it, right? So I remember I was doing a letter writing exercise. I don't remember what it was for, but I wrote a letter to myself about myself, right? And I read it to my partner at the time. And I was like so proud of this letter. Oh my God, it was so funny. Like I had spent all this time and like lots of tears, and I was like just like in it, right? I was like digging myself out. I was like, I'm sure I'm gonna like have gotten an A on this or whatever. I don't know. I didn't even know what the point. And so I read the letter to my partner, and they said, you don't have to kick your own ass. Did you know that? And I was like, what? Like, because I didn't realize that my language and my communication really to myself in this letter, it was just so unkind. Like, it was so brutal. But I had to really recognize that that was that inner voice. That was the voice of two Marines, probably. That was the voice of, accelerated school. That was the voice of, I have to be, I have to perform, I have to do, I have to be perfect, all of that stuff, right? All of those little voices had all kind of manifested. And so in that moment, it was like, bam, self-compassion, right? Begin to learn, like, okay, I've had many moments of self-compassion, even with working out. I was very kind of, it wasn't good enough just to do like regular yoga. I had to do, power yoga. And then it wasn't good enough to do power yoga. It had to be power hot yoga. And then power hot yoga wasn't good. It was like power hot yoga with like an extra crazy whatever, and it got me to the point again to kind of hit that wall and go, wait a second, right? Wait a second, Erica, what is happening right now, right? And so sometimes, we do have to bang our head up against the wall a few times. Hey, the extra, to be able to really be able to see ourselves and go, wait a second, I think I need to be a little bit kinder, a little bit gentler, a little bit nicer. And so as you begin to kind of have that compassion and you begin to really mirror and see yourself, then you go to start, okay, so how do I want it to be? So, I've power lifted, I've cycled. I mean, I was just a crazy girl in the gym. And so I was like, I want to be fit, I want to be trim, I want to be healthy, but I don't want to sacrifice my soul for it, right? Like, I don't want to wake up every day and my joints, having to tape my joints and that, this isn't really what I want for myself. And so again, being in alignment, right? I wake up and, I could have woken up every other day and been like, yeah, let's do it. But I woke up maybe on a Friday and was like, yeah, today's not the day. And Saturday, yeah, today's not the day. You know what? And Sunday, you know what? I think I'm done with this, right? And it just requires that self-reflection, and it requires you to really do the work. Pen and paper is huge. I cannot stress that enough. Having a pen and paper is like a free therapist for sure. And so why are we doing all this? Why do we have this big old discussion? Really, it's to begin to look at our relationship with success. I may teach a class on success, but we want to really, success is a moving target. Okay. Success is never one day you got success, the next day you fail again. Like, it doesn't, there's not, and you want to fail. The more you fail, the more you learn. Right. And so again, it's not about the destination. It's about where you're going. Right. And it's about you being cause in the matter of your life. So you deciding every day, every moment that you are going to be your own savior, because Disney's not coming. There's nobody coming, and there's no government. There's no senator, congressman. There's nobody. There's no church person. There's nobody coming. Okay, so I know some people think other people are coming. Like, that's on y'all, but there's nobody coming in this incarnation, physically, in this space and time. We have to, really allow ourselves and elevate ourselves. And so how do we do that? We do it with alignment. We do it really with integrity with ourselves. I could do a whole thing on integrity with self, Lord. And so wanting to make sure, that you're in alignment with your values. What is it that you want to create? It was important to me, to be with a really caring, loving, sweet man. That was really, really important. It wasn't as important all the other this and that and this and that and this and that, and gotta, I wanted somebody that could see me, right? For me. And so when we start to do our value propositions, the values may not be where, society tells us, where religion tells us, where school tells us, where, our reality makers tell us, where even our inner child tells us. Although I would say I did date a lot for my inner child for a long time. Again, I'm sure we'll get in that in some course that I teach. I don't know which one right now. Maybe shadow integration would be a good course, or family constellation actually would be a good course to put that in. And so as we kind of put our big girl, big boy pants on, we realize that growth, is a part of life. We're going to have a breakdown. We're going to have a breakthrough. Enjoy the breakthrough while you got it. Enjoy the breeze. Enjoy the moments. Really get the lusciousness, the gratitude, all of that in that moment, because, that savoring, of it when it is easy, right? And try to see it as being easier, because you don't have to necessarily grow through pain and suffering either. Although a lot of people enjoy pain and suffering. Again, shadow integration class, I'll teach about that. And so we want to recognize our relationship with success and see it more so as this continuous evolution. We're continuing to evolve, we're continuing to grow, we're continuing to expand. And so we have to take not only failure out of it, but ourself out of it as well, and see that we are part of something greater, something bigger, really than ourselves in space and time. All right, so a few more slides here, and then we are all done. So integrating, so we're going to integrate it all in. So really encourage journaling here, really releasing. I always like to tell people to get a trash journal and a treasure journal. Your trash journal is going to be all of your limiting beliefs, the I'm not good enough, all the crazy stuff we just went through. And again, the replay will be on the YouTube, so you can rewatch this. And so all of that goes in the trash journal. And then as you uncover the trash, naturally there's going to be treasure that's going to show up. There's going to be maybe love notes to yourself, maybe forgiveness notes, maybe affirmations come up, whatever those things may be. And really, again, that's why I love that trash journal so much, because when it's full, throw the thing away, burn it. You don't need to, keep it. If you want to do something a little bit more condensed, you can write a letter of forgiveness to your former self as well. I suggest you write it, and then you read it a few times to yourself, read it a few times to someone else. You're going to get a different experience when you're reading it to yourself versus reading it to somebody else. When you read it to yourself, obviously it does the work. When you read it to somebody else, it's going to open up your vulnerability a lot more. Okay. And you're going to see more of yourself in it. And it's going to be a little bit more difficult to let it go. So, I definitely challenge you with that. And there's a lot of really fun. Again, in some of these courses, I've learned so many cool, just like amazing, because it wasn't just that I did like all that school. During that school, I did so many like personal growth and self-development. And I hired this coach and I hired that coach, and all the crazy stuff that I teach you about, like, this has all been from my journey, right? My crazy, crazy journey to become a holistic doctor. And, all of it, none of it I would change for the world, because it's all really taught me and informed and really given me a lot of texture. Lioness, I love it. Okay, so as you kind of write that letter, have that symbolic release, personal mantra or affirmation, I learn, I evolve, I rise, I love, I touch, I breathe, I feel, I stay. These are all beautiful things to say. I rise, I elevate, I'm overflowing, all of those things, whatever. And really looking at what, again, reframing, what did I learn, what am I releasing, and what am I going to do next? So that's kind of the ear cap on it is, all right, this happened, the failure happened, what did I learn from this failure, what am I letting go from this failure, and what's next, right? And so sometimes the what's next can be a little bit challenging. So I love just going next, and that way I'm not making it a big deal. As you start to kind of get into the practice of, detaching from all of your relationship to failure, and you begin to look at failure, really, once you detach from all that, you're going to begin to look at failure again as a person. It's not you, it's not who you are, it's not who you be, but it's really just this kind of archetype, this scapegoat, this defense mechanism, etc. And then eventually you don't even need to hold on to the need of the failure anymore, because sometimes people hold on to failure as kind of evidence, like, here, this is evidence that this has happened, and so once we completely let it go, and we can actually visualize, if we see it as a person, we can visualize failure walking away from us, right? And as it's walking away, we're reflecting, what did I learn from this meeting, from this, time we spent together? What did I learn? What am I releasing? What am I letting go, right? And you can even visualize yourself handing over to them whatever it is you're releasing. And then what am I trying next? So with that, I'm going to turn that way. I'm going to turn totally away, right, from the failure. So the failure is walking in one direction, I'm walking another direction, and I'm looking out to the horizon, I'm looking out to the sun, I'm looking out to, what's next for me now that I have learned all of this stuff. So homework: identify one thing you've been avoiding trying again. So you want to look at failure on the court, you want to get on the court, look at one thing that you've tried, you failed, and you don't want to look at anymore. And commit yourself to it, and commit yourself to like a solid like month, maybe even 3 months. Give yourself that time, that space, and go through the process. Watch this video again, journal, write a letter, get busy with it, and then naturally establish support. We have communities that we offer that in, and so our communities are available. We have 3 of them, and I'm going to put up that slide. So join our healing communities. We have holistic lifestyle community, we have our Pure Black community. We also have our holistic health coaching cohort as well. On Saturday, just so you know, we do have an 11 o'clock class. I'm going to be teaching it's kind of like an open house for Intro to Holistic Medicine 1 and 2. I'm going to talk about what Holistic Medicine 1 is. I'm going to talk about what Holistic Medicine 2 is. I'm going to talk about the 2 classes. By that time, the catalog should be done. You should have gotten that emailed out. I'm not done with it quite yet. I'm like finishing touches, should be done by Friday. So you'll have that. So you'll be able to ask me any questions that you have. And we'll just be talking a little bit more again about things on Saturday. So that's Saturday, 11 a.m., wherever you are streaming me on. It's Eastern Standard Time as well. As we were talking about our healing communities, I also want, if you're already in the community, thank you. If you're already in the community, you do have access to the supplemental app. Oh, thank you so much. The Holistic Life app. You do have access to supplements if you need to run labs, also resources. Think of this as a holistic doctor in your pocket. I have it with me. So feel free, if you download the app, if you have a question, we watched this big thing together. We talked about failure. I've got this thing coming up. Feel free to reach out. I'm not just a pretty face. I also enjoy hearing feedback from you and answering your questions, because I know that this is a lot to unpack. And of course, over the next couple of days, you will be unpacking this more and more. So don't be, be okay with the fact your dreams may shift, may change, may move. Things may be a little weird. Don't make anything out of anything. Just kind of let it integrate into your cells, into your tissues, into your healing systems. All right. And then last thing I'm going to go over with you guys, the final assignment for Intro to Holistic Medicine 1. So if you're in Intro to Holistic Medicine 1, what needs to be completed is have watched all your videos, have answered all your discussions. Remember, all your discussions are under Intro to Holistic Medicine discussion in your community. Also complete your nutritional assessment, which is that questionnaire that we completed. 1 week of salivary pH, 1 week of heart rate tracking, and then a 4-week plan of what you're going to do with all the data. So I know that that is a lot. I can help you with it. You don't have to have it completed before Intro to Holistic Medicine 2, because those are two foundational courses that go together. But definitely put a good dent in it. Get most of it done. If you haven't already. I'm trying to also, I got a snag with tech support today, but I'm trying to reorganize the communities as well and make it a little bit more palatable before we launch all these classes. So bear with me. Also too, my school website is up. And I'm working on getting my actual kind of syllabus of all the classes I'm going to teach from now until the end of the year. I like to kind of keep a format where I do teach my foundation courses live, like I'm teaching now. So I'll teach Intro to Holistic Medicine 2 live, and then these other little kind of, kitschy courses that I like. Also, to Jumpstart to Healthy Eating will begin. That course is all about healthy eating and food. It's a 4-week course versus a 12-week, so it's a real short. And it's really designed for people that are super busy, don't have time to prepare food, but need to eat healthy on the go. So I'm kind of building that out and almost done with that. So that'll be fun. And then another class, I actually teach I teach one foundations class, which is my Intro to Holistic Medicine, and then I teach 2 other classes during the week. My Tuesday class is probably going to be taught just directly through the community through a Zoom link. So if you're registered for that class, you'll get a Zoom link. Hey Poetic, rather than a live link. So I just, I go live quite a bit, and I want to do some private stuff too. So we'll do all that. And that's pretty much it. So if do you guys have any questions for me before we, hey, what's up? Good. Before we jump out of here. Thank you guys for coming. I really appreciate all of you for attending and learning and being willing to look and see. And yeah, I mean, failure is such an interesting, Lordy, I've looked at failure from so many different angles. Screenshot time if you haven't. Oh, yay. There you go. Yay. There, I took a screenshot. I don't know if that's what you meant. So we do get like our videos, like they're afterwards, and like they're cut. I have so much content. You have no idea how much content I have. I have more content than I have time to organize the content. So just from all those years of doing this kind of stuff, no, you're not automatically signed up for Holistic 2. So there is a Chastity, there is a the enroll link is your first. It's the first one on my bio. So it's kind of 2 different ones. So it'll say like pre-registration, because it has it has all the intro classes, but it also has like which collectives you'd be interested in as well. So it's got more information on it if you can complete that. It's in there, but I'm working on right now trying to like organize everybody, because I realized that different people kind of got in different places. So I'm trying to kind of organize it. So I'm working with tech support. So hopefully it'll be done by Saturday. So that way it'll be a little bit, I realize that like you guys are like in 3 different groups, which not in your communities, but like in your actual course. I think some of you guys are off in different locales. So I'll organize all of you into one location, but definitely register for Holistic 2. Oh, okay. Where will we submit it? There should be a in the actually in your course, Intro to Holistic Medicine. There's a place to submit your NAQ. It's pretty early on. It's probably like in the first 4 weeks. If you have any problems, just shoot me a chat in the community, and I'll kind of guide and figure out kind of where where it's going to go. So yeah, great questions. Yay! I love it. People getting their stuff done. I'm so excited. Yeah, so intro to holistic medicine 2. Yeah. No, you're totally good. Intro to holistic medicine 2 is going to be your first link. So in my bio, it's the first link. Intro to holistic medicine 1, I think, is the second link, and then just the community is the third link. And intro to holistic medicine 2, just so you know, is all about detoxification. So we're going to do a detoxification questionnaire. So first we did nutritional. Now we're going to do detoxification. So it's a detox questionnaire that's all that. Thank you for the roses. And then we're going to do urinary pH, bowel transit time as well. So we're going to be able to kind of assess our digestive system. And then the urinary pH is going to show us like our need for antioxidants and stuff like that. And then I may throw in stomach acid in there too, just because it's easy and, you know, it's helpful because we are working on macros. So it's going to be really, we kind of refine your macros down a little bit more in the first 4 weeks. And then it's really about detox. So I teach you your detox pathways. I teach you phase 1, phase 2. I actually already have the syllabus done. So when you register, you'll get the syllabus. And then I think I went over it as well. If not on Saturday, I'm going to definitely go over it because I wanted to make sure people kind of know what's going on with it. Yeah, so we look at the detox pathways. We look at the 2 phases of your liver. We look at kind of simple protocols for detoxification, how to detoxify organs safely, in what order to do them, what things that you could be exposed to. Like it you know, it's a 12-week course, so it's pretty. And so these 2. Intro to Holistic Medicine 1 is all about nutrient deficiencies, and Intro to Holistic Medicine 2 is all about detoxification. And then I also have other like I have a course just for like client intake. I have a course that a foundations course that's all about communication. If you want to do more like media stuff or speaking or that kind of thing, you don't want to do kind of the one-on-one patient stuff, or you want to just deepen your patient analysis. And I think there's another foundations course too. Oh, there's one that goes over actually the scientific and the philosophical side of holistic medicine, and I kind of show you the pyramid and all that kind of stuff. So that's a deeper course. So those are your foundations course. Again, I'll have the schedule up for you guys by Saturday, and I'll also have your course catalog done, so you'll be able to kind of read through it and see. So I have tons of courses. We have 4-week courses, and then we have our foundations courses, and then we have our certification. Our holistic health coaching certification is a year-long certification, and I'm currently looking right now at more international accreditation bodies rather than a domestic. Oh, thank you, Brianna. Rather than just the U.S., just because the U.S. is so shaky right now. But the accreditations will qualify in the U.S. But I wanted to make sure that you guys, that your certification wasn't just tied to one place, that you could take your certification all over the world. So I've narrowed it down to like, I'm going to probably do 3 different accreditations for the actual holistic health coaching certification, and then we'll go from there. Also tomorrow, I'm super excited if you guys are interested in if you need a bachelor's degree, right? One of the schools that I'm actually on, their what do you call it? Their advisory board, Everglades University. They have a bachelor's in alternative medicine. That's really good. I did their bachelor's. It was my second bachelor's, and I also did their MPH, which is their master's in public health, and just love it. Hey, Roller Girl, good to see you. So really good school, really good curriculum. Really love it. They did really good. So if you're in the market for an undergrad, so I tend to do certifications and then more graduate level, going into holistic medicine as a doctorate, going into naturopathy as a doctorate, going into indigenous medicine as a doctorate, but we'll get there. We'll get there. We got so much ahead of you. Right now, it's just really getting these foundational courses, together, getting solidified, kind of getting, yeah, good to see you too, kind of getting the feel of it. And then, from there, those short courses, those 4-week courses are like awesome. I'll tell you, like, they're really, these 12 weeks are like, whoo, it's a lot, but the 4 weeks really, like, they're fun. They're really informative. They kind of pack a punch. So, and they're more practical. So, just these foundation courses are really good because they're more science based. So it really helps you to get the subjective, the objective, and the case understanding behind your belt. Because really, if you're taking a certification, like a holistic health coaching certification, I really want it so that you can get it paid off within the first 6 months. Like, really want you to kind of get up and rolling, coaching people at that, no longer than that 6-month mark. And so kind of front loading the scientific stuff kind of helps that process along, because then the usually the like electives and things like that are fun, and usually you can pick those up pretty quick, but the science stuff is a little bit more, you got to kind of go with it. So, all right, any other questions before I log off? I'm gonna do a little bit of work and then into bed. If you guys have not already caught me at 6 a.m., I know that's a crazy time for some people, but we do a 6 a.m. morning flow class. I know Tau to Kisses, she's always there holding it down. And so 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, we do 15 minutes of movement. I kind of do it like a HIIT style. So, we're moving. And then we do 15 minutes. Hey, Tabby Boy, we do 15 minutes of meditation. I've been kind of doing some breath of fire with a little bit of alternate nostril breathing, and then Sat Kriya, and then a prosperity. And then we do we stick with our, 3 to 4 tasks. And then we kind of really intend how we want to feel. And then also to create affirmations around it. And then by special request, we're also doing some meal planning as well. So if you need to get your mind and your body and your emotions all in alignment, that can be a really good place to start. Oh, you're so welcome, Brianna. Thank you so much for your attendance. I'm so grateful. The replay is on YouTube. Feel free to check it out if you need to rewatch it. I know there's like a lot to unpack usually with my classes. So, yeah, so that's a really fun class. I'm really excited about kind of, building it and growing it even more, and kind of playing around with it. So, yeah, I vibe and inspiration, and I love teaching, and I love teaching holistic medicine because I've been in it forever. And, somebody has to listen to me about it. So might as well be you guys. I spent literally, I went to school so you don't have to, so I can break all this down to you and give it to you in really organized ways. So, all right, guys, if there's nothing else, I'm going to log off because my phone is giving me the message, and it's approaching that time, and I still have to do my chart notes for the day. So, bye, everyone, on IG and YouTube and LinkedIn and Facebook and the Book of Face. See you guys on Saturday.